folks, it's John from A is for Alcoholic again. Today's conversation is with Kathryn Bennett, Utah's strongest woman. We discussed sobriety, we discussed eating disorders, self-harm, PTSD, all the great things that come with getting sober, or I should say all the things that ultimately drive us to getting sober, and what we can achieve once we've reached that sobriety. She is a world record holding weightlifter, fellow sobernaut, and all around fantastic person. It was insightful and really helpful for me today. We talked about the psychic ick that builds up inside of us, and that it's not just alcoholics, it's everybody. It's a human condition. And finding a way to release that psychic ache, whatever it might be, whether it's lifting weights or running or any number of positive coping mechanisms that are so desperately needed in these times. But it was so fantastic. I think you're really going to like this one. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Kathryn Bennett. The official drink of sobriety, is that the limoncello flavor?
This is the limoncello flavor. I also have the
one.
key lime here and the watermelon. The empty cans on the desk. So,
what's your favorite?
Oh, it's got to be the key lime. The key lime tastes like lime jello.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to endorse. Look, if anybody on LaCroix is listening, I am here to endorse your product. Sobriety drink times 10.
Yeah, I once I was on Twitter and I think I followed them, or there was something about tag somebody to enter to win or something like that, which I think they were probably just giving away a bunch of stuff. But I got like 3 cases or 3 12-packs of like new flavors, and so they just sent me this huge box that was all in this LaCroix like wrapping and whatever, and it was fun and exciting. And it's those little things. I mean, I guess we used to get excited about new beers or new flavored vodkas or whatever, but
yeah, now it's what, desserts and ice creams and coffees and
yes.
New flavors of pre-workout. I'm here for that too. Give me some.
Yes. I don't do the pre-workout stuff. I mean, I'm still dealing. I have, and I want to talk to you about strength training too, because it's something that I am sorely lacking in, and come to realize it in a very painful way over the last year. But
fair enough.
I sustained an injury as a middle-aged man. It's bound to happen when you're using improper form and lifting things that are too heavy. So
learn not to do that again, didn't you?
Oh yes, it's been months. So, well, first, thank you for doing this. This is super awesome. And my favorite first question for all my guests is, what do you remember? Like, what's your earliest memory of alcohol in your life or in your family?
Oh yeah, so my family, we were teetotalers, right? Like my folks were really conscientious and thoughtful about alcohol not being in the home, because we have such a heritage of abuse of substances. And so honestly, like I remember maybe my dad drinking a beer here and there, but it wasn't anything super impactful. My first real memory of alcohol is when I started drinking it. When I went off to college. So I graduated high school when I was 15. And so I went off to college quite young, like 16. And I went to my first fraternity party, and here was this forbidden substance that my whole life, everybody said, don't touch it. The church says, don't touch it. My parents say, don't touch it. And I'm like, I'm going to touch it. I'm going to touch it. I'm going to drink it a lot. and so I remember that Smirnoff Ice, that very first one at that. Oh, I know. Yeah. Cause I'm a classy lady, right? Standing around a trash can fire in a backyard of a fraternity party, drinking Smirnoff Ice. And I remember immediately feeling like, oh shit, this is the solution to my problems. Here it is. Like when people talk about that in AA meetings, like when you discover that alcohol is going to fix things, that's absolutely my experience. I felt like amazing after having that first drink.
Yeah. And what were the problems that you perceived as a 16-year-old in college? I imagine there were several. There were lots.
Oh yeah. There's some social limitations. If you're, my mom had to drive me to college for my first year. Wow. So that doesn't make you seem like a weirdo or anything. Yeah. I had a lot of childhood emotional abuse and trauma. And a lot of internalized, like a lot of internalized pain that it was fighting to get its way out. And so from the outside, and this is what I think is really interesting, from the outside, people will see somebody who is, again, deeply involved in the church. I was a varsity athlete. I was an academic all-star, obviously, to be graduating so young. And I was miserable every day of my life. I was like deeply involved in eating disordered behaviors, self-harm, all kinds of things. And a lot of it was just because I had a lot of trauma that I was trying to get out somehow, and I couldn't quite figure it out.
Right.
So appearances aren't really all what they seem sometimes.
No, they're not. It's very easy to look good on paper and be absolutely miserable and hating yourself and hurting yourself the entire time. So Smirnoff Ice was the solution to all the problems.
Yeah, well, it seemed like it at first. And then,
right.
Decades later, we found out that it's not.
Right. But I mean, at 16, I mean, especially because I'm imagining when I 16 and looking at everybody in college who's at least 18, 2 to 3, 4 years older than you. I mean, these are people to look up to, right? These are people to fit in with. And alcohol really helps you find that place to fit in.
Yeah, it was a big problem. It was a big problem because for my whole childhood, right? Like, I'm somebody who doesn't really fit in with the other kids. They're still like, oh, they like me, but there's still this kind of wall that I felt there, because like, well, you're so much younger, you're pretty weird. Like, well, we like you. And but I never had anybody be, really outright mean to me, but it was just always kind of like, just not a real relationship is what it felt like. Just, okay, maybe we're being nice to her, or and that could be just my perception of things. But you're 100% right. Like, I get off to college and I'm like, oh man, look at all these. And I grew up overseas too, and so like American kids were kind of new to me also. I grew up in Japan. And so I was like, oh, I can be like a cool American kid and do all this like American stuff. I'm a 16-year-old, blonde-haired, blue-eyed white girl, and I'm just like, oh, look, I can fit in with people that are like me for the first time ever. And it was a really exciting time. So but it didn't go. That first drink led down to I almost failed out of college my first year.
Wow.
Like, I'm in Mensa and I almost failed out of college my first year because I was like, oh, I love partying, it's a problem. Yeah.
So there was a lot of partying that first year. And what were the troubles that describe to me what the troubles were in almost failing and almost flunking out?
Oh yeah. So get this. When I started college, I was like, hey, I'm going to major in the thing that's hardest for me, because I feel as though I need to prove my worth as a human being. And so in order to feel worthy, I need to conquer the biggest mountain. So I decided to go at Purdue University. I said, I'm going to study physics, not like, any kind of applied science, but like hardcore physics. The arrogance required to come in. Oh, I'm so smart, I can major in physics. No. So what happened was that for the first time, and it's not like I'm not a hard worker, right? I've always worked hard, but I didn't realize how much harder I was going to have to work in these classes to really be successful. And then when I ran up against those barriers, I had never really been tested against serious challenges. And I found myself lacking. Like, I genuinely didn't have the aptitude for a lot of these domains. And it was really devastating to me, right? Because like, I wanted to be the smartest person in the room, and suddenly I was rapidly humbled, right? And how do you deal with that when you're a kid? You don't always make the best choices. I ended up eventually, what I graduated with was a degree in journalism with a chemistry minor, which, by the way, chemistry labs are much more fun than physics labs. So I got to still enjoy my my time in the sciences, but I felt like I had to prove my worth somehow, instead of doing the thing that I had a natural aptitude for and that I enjoyed. And that really led me to the wrong conclusions.
And so some of those problems in college, you obviously you made it through. And drinking didn't have to stop.
Well, no, so okay, so listen, my first year in college, I stopped. Like, I drank enthusiastically, and then my whole family said, hey, if you're going to go back, like you barely made it in, you're going to have to stop. And we're going to, we're going to kind of keep an eye on you and make sure that that's the case. Because if you're, if you're drinking this enthusiastically, you're not going to come out with a GPA that's helpful. You're not going to build the connections that you need. Like things aren't going to go well for you. And I agreed with that. And then also I got put on some psychiatric medication that like didn't play well with alcohol. And so I stopped for 3 years and until I turned 21 or 5 years, however long. I stopped for a while. But it was not clean sobriety. It was like that dry drunk, where I tried, then the self-harm accelerated, then like some of the bad relationship stuff accelerated, right? And so even though I wasn't drinking, like, oh, I'm technically sober, oh, look at me, this is a great decision. I still wasn't on the right path.
Yeah. And so when you hit 21 and then you can actually go into a bar, that's always a huge thing. I mean, I remember being 21 and dating somebody who was under 21, who was like 19. And it was such a struggle because like, you can't, because it's just like, that's the cutoff. And so now I can go out and there's this whole new world of drinking in public and being an idiot in public and going out with your friends. And did you find did that accelerate the drinking?
Well, see, here's the thing. I moved away, like right after my 21st birthday, I had been living in Indiana and I moved away to a really small town here in northwestern Colorado. I got my first job as a newspaper copy editor, which means that I worked from 4 p.m. till midnight on like, weekends and the first part of the week. So I think my days off were like Wednesday, Thursday, right? So super crummy hours, but it was a really good opportunity. And it was living in my home state, like living in northwestern Colorado. And I said, oh, this is going to be great. The problem with that was that on the days I was off, like nobody else was off. And then by the time I got off work, everything was shut down. So I drank alone, like from the beginning. Which is really, like, now that we're talking about this, I didn't really realize that. But like, I was like, oh, I'm going to be a sophisticated lady. Like, I'm going to go to wine tastings and I'm going to learn about wine and how cheese gets paired with wine. And this will help me in my professional career. But the problem is you can know all those things. And then if you get sloppy drunk in front of all the people that you work with, like, would you believe that's not something that advances? That doesn't.
They're not impressed.
No, and I was like taking alcohol to work and shit, like on
wow.
like lunch breaks and stuff, lunch breaks or dinner breaks, or we go to the pub. So, young person in a ski town, of course, we had some of that, but like for the most part, I was like trying fancy cocktails by myself in my house from the very beginning of my drinking career. So yeah,
and and it's we often delude ourselves into thinking these things are more sophisticated than they are, right? And I don't want to I had this conversation with friends from back in the day, and it wasn't all bad. They weren't all bad, terrible experiences, right? I mean, there was some fun to be had at that point. Unfortunately, I was incapable of having just the right amount of fun, and it almost always descended into something worse, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, fundamentally, a wine tasting is fine on its own, but I simply cannot put myself in that situation anymore. Yeah. Otherwise, it becomes a wine guzzling.
Yeah, well, in the way you describe it, it's like I couldn't trust myself to be around other people because I would become a problem. And then it's like, oh, okay, I would, instead of like stopping drinking and being like, oh, hey, I'm damaging my reputation for this, I'm like, I just do this by myself in my house,
and the isolation,
until I can find the right people. And then I found people who were more enthusiastic about it, and then it wasn't a problem. We were all problems together, but like until I found that group, I was like, nah, it's okay, I'll just do it at home,
Yeah, and that work in that swing shift, and and then ultimately, instead of finding people in those early years of your career that are working on their careers, you find the people who are working those swing shifts, who you can go meet up with for a drink at 1 o'clock in the morning, right? Instead of, whatever else, getting sleep. It's taken me decades to be able to work a swing shift and like go home, go to bed, wake up early. because
I
it's
don't
like,
have that discipline. No, no, I
well, I'm
used to
not
work.
saying I do it every night, but yes,
Oh,
yes.
that's amazing. No, I used to work these 12-hour shifts where I would rotate between day and night. It's called the DuPont schedule. I worked at a Department of Defense laboratory at this time. Like we were
Mm-hmm.
demilitarizing chemical weapons after, like, that was my second
Damn.
job after I left the newspaper. So it was like, not, I mean, it's not a place where you want to be super hungover. If I may
No.
be so bold, like, that's not a great place to have a drinking problem. Like, oh, hey, look, extremely dangerous, like literal warheads, that
Damn.
we're processing and stuff. And so, but I was in my early 20s. And so, like, that's when I found my real good drinking crew, was when I lived in Salt Lake City, Utah, which, by the way, everybody's either in Temple or, like, doing drugs off the back of a toilet. Like, there's no in between. If you're in your 20s in Salt Lake City, it doesn't exist. And so I found, the right group of folks after finding like match for match on Craigslist. Like, that's so I found
Wow.
my friend group in Salt Lake City, and they rode hard. And so I would get off of work and go to the bars until like 2 a.m, and then I'd have to be back at work at 6.
Oh my.
And so, like, at work at 6, and I lived an hour and a half away, and I'm like processing extremely hazardous chemicals while just like, it's all right, I'm okay to drive. No, like, looking back at this, I'm like, how the only reason I'm alive still is so that I can tell other people how ridiculous this kind of stuff is. There's
Right.
no other reason. Like, I should definitely be dead.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
I can't even imagine. I was hungover, working at a coffee shop, and I thought it was the worst possible thing in the world, let alone.
dude, I would be in like an M40 gas mask for 12 hours sometimes, because, like, we'd have a leak or something would happen at the plant, and you'd have to put on a butyl rubber gas mask,
Mhm.
hung over for 12
Oh.
hours in a butyl rubber gas mask. Like, you can't call me weak.
Breathing in your own Smirnoff ice that's just oozing out of you. Yeah, your own gassing
So bad.
off of sorts. Oh my
So
God.
bad. Yeah.
Yes. Because I just remember those hangovers where it was just like I could smell myself, and I was like, I know it's bad. And it's like I've taken a shower and I've brushed my teeth and everything smells like a barroom floor. And
Yeah.
it's just me. So this is in your early 20s. And
Yeah.
how long does this go on for? Are you before is there like real problems? Are there legal problems? Are there any issues that happen that cause you to come out of it?
Well, I mean, there weren't legal problems there weren't consequences for a while, which is the problem,
Mhm.
because I'm a relatively privileged, relatively attractive, and relatively intelligent white lady. Okay.
Mhm.
And so I want to position this as the fact that, like, I think I probably would have faced consequences a lot earlier. And I
Mhm.
almost wish that I would have, but given the fact that I'm like, of my kind of like societal situation, I was given a lot of free passes.
Right.
Oh, you're speeding. Oh, you fell asleep at the wheel. Oh, it's like some of these things. If there would have been, if there would have been some consequences, I would have been much more grateful, because sometimes I did things just to see if anyone would notice that I was around. And
Mhm.
I remember one time right before I stopped, like, 'cause I stopped drinking when I was 33, I think, back in 2018. Um, and I remember there was this one time about 6 months before that this sheriff pulled me over and my registration was out of date. And I was like I felt so happy that someone gave a shit on that day. You know what I mean? I was like, someone noticed that I did something wrong, and they actually want me to do the right thing. They care about it. And it wasn't like that sheriff, I'm sure it was just like, oh, dummy, like, register your car. But for me on that day, I was like, oh, wow, that's really what a relief. So yeah, so it went on. I mean, I started drinking when I was 16, took a little bit of break, took some breaks here and there, but there were, like, not really job consequences. Like, I never got fired
Mhm.
for drinking. Like, I mean, I probably didn't get the best performance reviews, but I'm charming as shit. And so, like, it just didn't matter. Um, but then there was a day that came when, like, my health was suffering really bad, and I had a really big blowout out with my partner at the time. And he was like, you've got to get some help for this. And over those 10 to 12 years, during that time, I kept seeking help for mental health, because I had attempted suicide when I was 15. I considered myself to be depressed, or like, gosh, do I have bipolar disorder? Like, is there something wrong? Since then, we've kind of sussed out that it's like pretty significant PTSD from a lot of stuff that happened in my childhood and things along those lines. But I thought I was mentally ill. And I didn't even consider that alcohol could play a role in any of this. And until someone, like, I'd had people who told me about AA, and I was like, oh, how nice of them that they're telling me about AA because they want me to empathize with their problems. Like, it didn't occur to me that they were like, hey, would you like to come to AA? Like, maybe you've got a fucking, like, pardon my language, maybe
That's
you've got
fine.
a problem. Like, maybe there's something wrong with you. But I was like, oh, these kind, wonderful men at work who are saying, like, maybe, oh, hey, if there's an AA meeting, I'm like, oh, I'm so glad you're telling me that you have a problem because now I can support you. Like, anyway, so yeah, I always thought it was like I had a mental health disorder. And that's what I was trying to treat until my partner was like, if you don't stop drinking, I'm going to kick you out. And I didn't want to be homeless. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I think there was, my friend Jerry tells a story about going to a therapist while he was still drinking. And the therapist said, he paid for the therapist and said, look, I can't continue to treat you if you're not going to stop drinking. Are you going to stop drinking? And he said, no. And the therapist gave him his money back and sent him on his way. It was like, I can't, because like, that's the thing. We can't even deal with anything else until that is gone, until there's a willingness to let that go. Can you talk a little bit about what brings a 15-year-old PTSD to the point of suicide?
Yeah, well, I mean, I come from like a highly religiously, like serious evangelical Christian background with a lot of shame and guilt and control. And I'm an only child of parents who struggle with their own situations. Like I mentioned, the fact that we didn't really have alcohol in the house because we've got these kind of tendencies in our genetics is what I suspect. And so yeah, I mean, it felt like, gosh, you're never going to be good enough. So why bother? I mean, I just struggled with a lot of emotional and mental challenges as a young person that nobody paid attention to.
Yeah.
And it really, like, I'm just starting to work with a trauma therapist right now, which, by the way, EMDR, I am finding huge value in. So if folks listening are nervous or hesitant about that, if you've got trauma in your past, someone has told you have trauma, like, EMDR is a lifesaver. And I suspect that if we had more folks who understood the trauma that they came from, that substance abuse might actually diminish a little bit.
And EMDR, what does it stand
EMDR
for?
is it's eye movement desensitization, something. It's a scientifically proven therapeutic modality for PTSD, in which they have you you hold these two vibrating, like, pods, like kind of these little canisters in your hand. They fit in your hand and they vibrate. And what it does is it actually works on, like, you go back into the traumatic event, like you go visit it in your mind and then push out some of that stimuli from your body, while you're holding these little I don't fully understand how it works. I just went to an amazing therapist, and I've been working with her for a couple months, who has actually started to push some of this trauma out of my bloodstream a little bit. And I've never actually gotten relief from therapy until I was able to get in with her. So
wow. Okay.
yeah.
All right. Well, that's good. That's good news. That's good to hear.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
So back to your partner saying you've got to get help or you've got to leave.
Yeah.
And did you get help at that point?
Yeah. I mean, I went to an all women's AA meeting for my first meeting, which was wonderful, and I still have some great friends from that time. And then I spent about a year and a half going to, I had to go to 1 to 2 meetings a day. I went to the 7 a.m. early birds group in Grand Junction, Colorado, because I figured that folks who woke up to go to a AA meeting at 7 in the morning were probably folks who were pretty dedicated to getting sober. So I chose that group, and I would go every day before work, and then I'd, go to a couple after work. And yeah, I really threw myself wholeheartedly into the program. I do believe that I think AA works for some people. I think there are different ways that we can all interact with it. Take what you can, take what works for you, that kind of a thing. But I did work the steps with the sponsor, which I think if I hadn't done that, I probably wouldn't be where I am today because of the nature of my personal illness. And yeah, that was a transformative day, but it was an ugly first year of sobriety, bud. Like that was not fun. It's not fun, but it was worth it.
What was ugly about it?
Oh, I was just my body was so jacked up from all of the changes,
Yeah.
right? Like just sleeping was problematic. I was crawling out of my skin. Like I'm an artist too, and you should see some of the art that I created during that time. It's troubling, like you can just tell that there's just like these demons, kind of you're sweating out. You're sitting there and just sweating it out, like white knuckling it and trying to stay employed, trying to stay in a healthy relationship, trying to take care of my bills and my dog and like all of that stuff. I just feel like that first year, like once I got my year chip, I was like, okay, like maybe I can relax a little bit, but it just felt like I was dedicating so much of my days to just getting through, that first year. So that's why I picked up weightlifting,
So weightlifting. So you get sober. You've been sober now. You said 2018. What's your date? Your
I think it's 2/19/18.
Okay.
February 19th, 18th. I have to go.
So that's like almost 4 years we're coming up on, right?
Yeah, we're getting there.
Awesome. So weightlifting. This comes in how in sobriety?
Yeah, so I was, like I said, I was a varsity athlete in high school and played a bunch of sports. I've been a skier for a lot of years, living in Colorado where I am. And I always really loved the gym. And I was struggling, like I say, in early sobriety, my body just felt gross, like painful and achy, and I wasn't sleeping well. And so my partner at the time, he and I decided, hey, we're going to start getting healthy too, because he stopped drinking when I did, which was a pretty cool thing to do. And so, okay, we're going to go work with a trainer. And I started working with a trainer like 3 to 4 months in. He goes, like, you're really strong, right? I'm like, yeah. I mean, I'm pretty strong. He's like, no, that's not what no, like, you're really strong. Like, you should consider competing. And I said, well, okay. Yeah, I'll think about that. And we were just doing it for general health and welfare and fitness, to like get out of the house a little bit and do something fun together, right? And then we started, okay, well, let's be a little bit more intentional about this strength building aspect. And okay, so the reason I drank was because I would build up all of this. It just felt like this psychic ick, like this anxiety, like this ball of something in my chest. And when I drank, I could like get that to go away. And in the early days of sobriety, I tried to use art to manage this as well, and it did not really have the same like effect. It was helpful, but not quite as like aggressive a solution as what I was hoping for. And then I found when I started going to the gym and picking up, like I pick up very heavy things, like I pick up 500 pounds now and walk around with it, right? But when I was just starting, I found that like the rush and the focus and the like brain chemicals that were generated by very aggressive exercise helped me to deal with the physical consequences of my psychiatric, like my psychosocial problems. So I could use physical movement to push out the ick. And as a consequence, like it's a major coping mechanism for me. Like if it was taken away, I would live still, right? I understand that it's not the sole thing, but at this point, it's one of my passions. I love it. I'm a world record holding strong woman. Like I have a world record in a grip sport. I'm a current.
Wait, what's a grip sport?
Oh yeah, so grip sport is like obviously you pick up most things with your hands, right? Like
right.
But it's like grip specific. So it's like my world record is in what's called the blockbuster, which is a 5x5 square piece of metal that we suspend weight from, and then you have to pick it up, and it has there's like a little peg that's like 8.5 inches above the floor, and you have to lift the weight up to the peg and then back down. But yes, I have it's a very specific sport, but nonetheless world record holder.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and then I'm also a champion strong woman, and I'll be competing at the national show this year for the U.S. Strongman Corporation, or excuse me, USS Strongman. And so it just accelerated from there. But by getting sober, what it allowed me to do was find my passion and find my calling, like the thing that I was meant to do. And it also helped me return back to what I think like back to that idea of I need to prove myself and I need to do the hardest thing. Like there's nothing wrong with that ideology. Like I chose to study physics and I ran into too many barriers and I gave up. This time I'm choosing to do the hardest thing, but because I'm sober and because I have support and because I have the right resources and I have the right mindset, now I can succeed. And so it's just been a really interesting, age 15 to age 35. So when I was 15, like things didn't go great. When I was 35, I won I won Utah's Strongest Woman, and it took years to get to that point. But to understand the mental fortitude of trying something challenging and then overcoming it, as opposed to trying something challenging and then giving up.
Yeah.
It's a very profound transition in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very true. And I love this idea of the psychic ick and having to release it, because I think for me, and maybe you can relate to this, is that as an alcoholic, as somebody who is intrinsically addicted to fill in the blank, right? Alcohol was just the main one that took over about 2 decades of my life. And so maybe also the psychic ick comes from some regret that I haven't let go of that. But so whether it's food or, being quarantined in 2020 and how the internet has taken over my brain, or any number of things, external and internal, those PTSD moments from my childhood, the psychic ick builds up. And so I have just found that regardless of what I do, I don't think that is ever going to not fill up inside me at some point. Right. And I think that's a general human condition, right? We just psychic ick builds up and we have to find a way to release it. And you found this in weightlifting. Once I got sober, it took me many years to get to the point where running was my thing, and I dropped like 90 pounds in a year. And I know, and I've gained back like 25 of them, since 2020. And that's fine. I will deal with that. But one of the things that was told to me was, you can't just keep running, John. Like, you're not building any strength. Like, that's fine. And so people would suggest things and I go, I'm not getting the same rush. I'm not getting the same release. I'm not getting the same relief. And so I'm like, damn it, I don't want to lift heavy things because I don't feel that thing that you feel. And also I wasn't trying very hard and I was doing it on my own without any supervision. And I thought, how much harm can a 26-pound kettlebell do? I found out very quickly how much harm.
I'm not laughing at your misfortune, but
no.
Kettlebell can do a lot of harm.
Because I'm 44 years old and I only started, taking care of my body in late 2018. A kettlebell at 26 pounds can do a lot of damage when you're swinging it around and not holding your back in the proper position, keeping it straight. So now I'm going to physical therapy and we're doing little things with no weights, and they're often checking, are you okay? Any pain? I'm like, no, I'm good. I think we're getting there. I think we're turning the corner, blah, blah, blah. But my point is the idea of the psychic ick and finding the thing that will release it is phenomenal.
It's different for everyone, right? For me, I broke my foot this year and I still came out on top. I still won my most recent show. Like I broke my foot and I got diagnosed with asthma over the summer. You can believe it. But here's the thing is that, like, what you're describing, everybody gets humbled in the weight room. Everybody gets humbled probably in running, in distance running, like what you've been doing, right? Everybody gets humbled and injured at some point. And I think one of the coolest things that we get to do this in sobriety, and I would never have thought of this before, is rebuild. Because I have rebuilt my entire life, and nothing that people can, like, there's nothing that can happen to me now. And maybe this is an arrogant statement, but I fully believe it. There's nothing that can happen to me now that I can't manage, because I already went through the most difficult, like I've already had the worst day of my life. It's already happened. So like, you come out with me with a broken foot, come at me with a back injury, come at me with like, oh, look, you have asthma now. Okay, well, I know how to handle all that. And that's the great part of being sober, is that we're adults and we get to handle our own stuff. Like, and it sucks to have to rebuild, but that's the way that life works.
Yeah.
And that's we talk about a lot in strongman, which is my sport of choice. We talk about embrace the suck, because if you've ever been a weightlifter and you try to pick up weight that is far away from you, like you're trying to deadlift and you hold it at arm's length, good luck. You can get like the bar, right? But if you hug it close to you, you get really close to the source of your pain and you investigate it and you hold it tight and you drag it up your body. That's where you get the most leverage. And I think as alcoholics, we have this tendency to run away from our pain. But what getting sober does is it affords us the opportunity, and not even just the opportunity, but like the delight of being able to blast through that stuff.
Yeah. Yes. I would agree. Because it's very easy on mile one when all the little aches and pains come in and they're like very pronounced. And I'm like, this is only mile one. And then somewhere around 5 or 6, I'm like, those are long gone. And then I'm like, well, I was only going to do 6 miles, but I feel pretty good, so I should probably just go. And it's pouring down rain, and I'm like, this feels epic somehow, So, and then it becomes 10 miles on a random Monday afternoon. So I completely understand on that level, and I'm working on it with my weights, and I'll get there. It's just it's that I had another friend of mine in fitness, and he's many years older than I am. Well, he's like 12 years older than I am. And he said, you just have to get used to starting over. And I was like, God damn it, I hate that. I hate that. I'm like, no, I'm not doing this again. And so, and part of my part of my current motivation is, once I get this shit together, I'm not going to lose it again, because 2020 came and there were all kinds of external things that I could not change, I could not handle, I could not accept. There were things I couldn't accept, and I had to, and I couldn't, and back and forth. And but it's like, now I'm going to get it together and we're going to keep it here. So we have to, like, this is that rebuilding period. And one of the other things that you mentioned was about dealing with food in sobriety and or just addiction in general. And that's something that I am still trying to build, as a healthy relationship to food, because I don't want to be like, well, M&Ms are bad. I mean, I'm pretty sure they are, but but they're bad for me.
But they bring you delight too. And here's the thing is, I have been monastic about my food for so many years. Like when I was younger, I was trying to control my size. And so I was very restrictive in what I ate. And then even recently, like when I got sober, my ex and we gave up, like we started keto, which, by the way, I just not recommend that unless your doctor tells you to do it, because, oh my God, it might, like, my heart almost exploded. I mean, if you're doing it, like, that's, anybody listening, that's cool. But, like, just kind of talk to your health professional first before you hit up that keto diet. It did not go well for me health-wise. But I have been really restrictive in what I've been eating, and just like lean meats, vegetables, and rice for like years. And right now it's really funny. I've got another friend who's visiting me, and she's also a sober sister, a sober friend. And she's like, hey, let's go to this restaurant. And I'm like, a restaurant? And then I have to eat in front of people. Like, I don't really want to do that. And she's like, no, let's go. It'll be really fun. And so we go, and then I'm eating this delicious food. And I'm like, wait a second, but food can also be a source of delight for me. It doesn't have to be a compulsion. It can be something that I really enjoy, and I eat with the idea of having a good time. And then I can leave some behind on the plate, and it's not the end of the world, But
it's that last part that I'm sometimes have difficulty with, is that leaving it on the plate. And so it's like, and the only way I did lose all that weight was I started counting calories, and it worked. And so now in my head, everything is a calorie, and I'm completely obsessed and going crazy. And, but so I'm just wondering how you currently, at your world record holding status, how you manage food intake. And I mean, I imagine with weightlifting, there's certain weight classes, right? Do you not?
Yeah. You know what? I am resigned and, in fact, enthusiastic about the fact that I am a super heavyweight competitor.
Okay.
I'm not gonna cut weight, because here's the thing. Number one, super heavyweights get to pick up the most weight, which is most impressive, and then you get the most cheering. Like, that's okay. I want attention, and so if I'm going to get the most attention, I need to be picking up the biggest thing. So, like, you could probably pay me in attention. I don't even really need money. Don't tell my boss, but like, it's pretty close. Anyway, so that's good news. And when it comes to my food intake, I eat intuitively. There's a book called Intuitive Eating that I really love. I suffered for a lot of years under neuroticism around food, where I was constantly considering, is this something that's good for my body? Okay, yeah, you know what? I'm just kind of a fat lady, and I'm 37 on Saturday, and I'm just like kind of a middle-aged fat lady who can also pick up 500 pounds, and so, like, I'm okay with it. They make clothes in my size that I can buy. So I'm not, as long as I am within the size range that clothes are made for me, I feel confident in the way that I look. And as a consequence, I'm comfortable. Like, I try to get, high protein, but like, protein's kind of expensive right now too. So what do I eat? Like, a ton of eggs. I love eggs. I love rice. I love lean meats. I love vegetables, but I also eat gummy bears at an alarming pace. Like, and there's peach rings in my purse right now because I'm like, I might need a snack later. So when it comes down to it, I think it really just comes down to like, to developing peace around it, and understanding that my body isn't what I thought it would be, but it can do some amazing shit. And so if I'm like, if some people have a concept of me not looking right, like, that's on them. It's not on me.
Yeah. I think I've heard about intuitive eating, and maybe you can assuage some of my concerns with it, is that I feel as if my brain is broken in that particular that way of thinking and being intuitive, because my intuition for so many years around alcohol, and also when I was drinking around food, was to take in as much as possible. Like when I talked about M&Ms, I used to have family size bags in the bedside, table, whatever. And so it's like, if my intuition is broken, how can I trust my intuition on that food? And so I'm trying to slowly, like, and so I get concerned about bringing certain things into the house because I know that I will eat them all. So it's like this, like, slow moving twist of, I can have some things, and leaving it on the plate is just always the hardest thing. The governor of how hungry I am doesn't seem to work right.
Well, it takes practice. It takes practice. Yeah. What you're describing, like, I for months kept a journal in which I was like, after that meal, how full did I feel? Was it like, hey, I could eat more? So it's like a 3. I'm, like, a satiation index was like 3, or like, oh, I feel comfortable and energized, it's like a 5. Or like, maybe I feel like maybe I shouldn't, like, it's a little uncomfortable to have eaten that much. So like a 7. Or like Thanksgiving, you're at like a 10. Like, okay, like I rocked out on Thanksgiving. And what I found, like, during my first like 6 months of intuitive eating, back in the day when I very first started this in like formal eating disorder treatment, really what I ate was chicken wings and chocolate cake. Like, I'm not even kidding, because I had denied myself. I had been eating like vegetables with no sauce and like dry chicken breasts for the majority of my young adulthood, because I'm like, oh God, I don't want to get fat. Which, by the way, I've got like health conditions, like hormone conditions, that make it really difficult for me to lose weight. And those were accelerating during that time. So, oh my gosh, I can only eat these certain things. And then when they told me I could eat anything I wanted, I was like, chicken wings and chocolate cake. And that lasted not as long as you'd think. I was like, okay, my body actually needs a vegetable now. like, maybe I should eat it. Maybe I should eat a tomato, or like, get a carrot on board, or like some asparagus or something. And I found that my body, like if you're trying to maintain a certain weight, I think that it can be a little challenging. And divorcing the idea that weight is tied to health is really important for me, because I'm arguably healthier than a lot of other people that are my size because of what I do. Right. The determinants of health, like, I've got a master's in public health, and what we think about your determinants of health are you drinking alcohol? Well, you and I both have that solved. Okay. So, yeah, we're healthy, box checked. Okay. Are you smoking cigarettes? or using tobacco products. Like I smoke a cigar every now and again. Don't tell my doctor or my health insurance company, but like on occasion I'll have a cigar, but like, okay. So that's probably okay. Are you eating enough vegetables? Not how many servings are you getting? Doesn't really matter to the type or the nature of them. It's just like, are you eating fruits and vegetables? Yes or no? Yes. Okay. You and I are doing that as well. And are you exercising what the CDC recommends? If you look at those 4 factors, your weight, people who are doing all of these things can be all different sizes, right? But as long as you're maintaining those 4 dimensions of health and like going to the doctor to get your health needs addressed, you tend to be longer in the lifespan.
Right.
Like overweight people who are unhealthy are just as at risk as underweight people who are unhealthy, right? So again, but it's a lot of mindset shifting. We've got to get there as a society,
Yeah, I need to get that as a human being, and be able to manage that, because I would love to be able to share that feeling of like, oh, I figured it out and this is how, and I haven't, right?
Yeah. Well, it's not every day, but it's not every day. Sometimes I have days where I eat like a whole box of cereal and I'm like, not the best adult decision I could have made today. Things could have like, that would have been I could make a smarter choice. But just like and this idea of even having everything dialed in and functioning perfectly, I've had that, I think maybe for one day, and then everything immediately went to shit again. Like the point for me is not really to have everything functional. It's the point for me is to be strong enough to hold it all together when it does fall apart, which is 90% of the time something's horribly wrong.
Yeah.
Diet or working out, or like my dog currently has cancer, like shit, there's so much that goes on that's super wrong. And you don't even have to maintain a positive mindset during that time. You just have to get through it.
Yeah, I hear you. I think too, as somebody who runs, I'm a little more obsessed with losing weight, because the lighter I am, the easier it is on all the joints and blah, blah, blah. And so there is some actual correlation to that. And that's my thing. That's not for everybody, but that's my thing. And so, and I'll get through it. And we have a race. I have a race next month. And I know that I can do it. I did 10 miles on Monday, so I can run the 13 miles on the 12th of December.
Heck yeah.
So, but I would like to do it a little bit better. You know what I mean? I'd like to feel okay afterwards. And so it's like those things where I'm like, okay, so let's focus in on this as the actual goal instead of this sort of, and there were injuries, multiple injuries. And it's like, there was nothing I could do about those other than what I was doing. And that just I wasn't able to train in the way that I wanted to. And so all this to say, as I'm lamenting and complaining and whatnot, is that, like you said, you have to be strong enough to deal with it.
Yeah.
And that was the foundation that I have begun to build when I decided to quit drinking. Now I didn't ask you, was there like a big moment of clarity day? Was there an epiphany or anything, or was it just, this ain't working?
Well, I mean, there was the day that my partner was like, I'm going to kick you out if you don't stop drinking, right? Like, so that, I mean, again, somebody who loved me enough to give me a consequence.
Yeah.
And he was that person at that time. And since then, we've parted ways. But I do appreciate the fact that he had the honesty and the candor to say, like, this is not working for me. And if you can't get it together, like, you're obviously going to have to leave. That was an appropriate response. At that time, I was so desperate because I had tried everything else, right? I had tried psychiatric medications, which I don't take anymore, but I definitely don't begrudge people who choose that path. But I had chosen therapy. I had tried, support groups for different things. And really, when it came down to it, I wasn't tackling the root of the problem. And even the alcoholism for me is not the root of the problem. It's trauma from childhood. It's trauma from previous relationships. And it's trauma from like a variety of other events that have happened in my life that made me want to zone out with drinking. And so, but I feel like just getting out of the burning building was so important for me at that time. Like now that I'm 3 years out, now I can say, okay, let's tackle some more of these challenging issues. But for those first 2.5 years, I was just getting out of the burning building. And I hope that people who are listening to that understand. And like, you can't, like, I didn't put high expectations on myself. It was like, go to work every day, be a function, pay your bills on time. And since then, I've bought a house on my own with the money that I saved from stopping drinking. Like, that's how much alcohol I was consuming, that I was able to put money aside in 18 months to buy a damn house. Okay. So, and I just bought a new car, and it's not all about things, but it's like, I have had some medical events this year. I can pay the medical bills. I'm not dodging creditors right now. You know what I mean? It's a way, it's an easier and more like refreshing and more empowering way to live your life. I'm a director at my current role in my job, right? Like I'm able to move up. And if I had never gotten sober, if I never started tackling the reasons that I started drinking, I would still be like struggling financially. I would still be struggling emotionally and like in bad relationships and not living the dream.
Yeah. So is there anything currently that in sobriety that you struggle with or find difficulty with?
I don't struggle to stay sober because I know what I know, I'm convinced in my heart of hearts that if I pick up another drink of alcohol, that will be the thing that kills me. And there may be a day when I decide that that's the right option, right? But I haven't had that in a really long time. But I do struggle like when I get sick, like over the summer I was sick, I broke my foot, right? If I can't get to the gym, then I've got to think of like different coping mechanisms. So I've had to have like some backup coping mechanisms, right? And if I'm going to be honest with you, dating as a sober person, giant pain in the ass. Like, I am not into it. Like, it is so hard to find folks who are supportive of sobriety. They're always so like, oh my gosh, can I drink around you? Because like, it's going to throw you. I'm like, it's not okay. Someone's drinking a beer in front of me. It's not going to cause me to go off the wagon. Or if like, if I pick up the wrong drink and I have a sip of it, like, oh my, I'm not going to start like, running people over in my car. But that's the concept that people have. Like, if you're sober, you're defective, or they can't imagine living life with a sober person. And so, yeah, like dating sucks.
Yes. I'm always, and I think I said this to somebody about, oh gosh, being on a dating app and everybody has a glass of wine in their hands or at a party or something like that. And she countered and she said, well, perhaps this is just when people feel the most confident and free and looking good and all that stuff. And I think that may have some baggage around it too, is that we only feel confident and free when we have a glass of wine and that sort of inflated sense of self-esteem. But yes, it is damn near impossible. It seems.
You don't want to 13th step somebody, like show up and be like, hey, new sober person, what's up? You know, like that's a bad look too. May I not advocate for that decision?
No.
It's just
not at all.
It's a challenge. And I mean, or even finding sober friends, like all of my friends right now, all my girlfriends are mostly sober folks, but it's not easy to find that friend group. And I think really what I've had to do is just being really comfortable on my own. A lot of my gym folks, like the folks that I work out with, like almost everybody at my current gym is also sober. I found this out because I was talking to the owner and they volunteer and like help. They give memberships to the folks that are coming out of like a sober living facility that's nearby, because it's something that's close to their hearts, which I love.
That's great.
But yeah, I think just the socialization aspect, it gets lonely, but I'd rather be lonely than dead.
Yeah.
So
no joke. So, and I think lastly, do you have any advice for anyone who is looking to get sober, stay sober? What would you tell them?
Yeah, during those early days, just give yourself a lot of grace, and don't put high expectations on yourself right out of the gate. Like learning to accept what is and understanding that this is a lot of work. Like, I feel like a lot of people look at people like you and I who have been doing this for a hot second and they're like, oh gosh, I want what you have. And I have had many days of like crying in the shower because to get here, right? And I still do. And so I think that just understanding that this is a lot of work and it's the only way out. So, and we're all here to support you in that, I'm personally here. Contact me on Instagram. My Instagram is at KBLifts, KAYBEE lifts. I'm here to talk to folks about sobriety. Don't be shy. Don't be shy, but you got to put in the work.
Yes, you do. Unfortunately, or fortunately, however you look at it, I've done it plenty of days begrudgingly. Like
yes.
I've promised myself some push-ups and some sit-ups and some squats and some miles every single day in November. And so I've got to go take care of those as soon as we're done here. And that's just that one part of it. And, this is part of it as well. I think, I often think about, well, why do you do this podcast? Because I want to check in. I want to make sure that I'm doing it for the right reasons. And I was talking to a friend of mine, and he drinks. And there was something, his perception was that I felt like I was better than him. And I said, that's not it at all. I said, I think you're I think you're missing the mark here. And if anything, I'm worse.
Yeah.
I was unable to cope. And regardless of your relationship with alcohol currently, whatever, like that's really not the case. And, honestly, I do it for my own sobriety as much as I do to help other people. There is definitely something, I don't want to say selfish, but there's a element of self-preservation in there. Right.
Well, I tell everybody, I'm very open about being sober at work because number one, because the people who got me in the rooms of AA were people I worked with. And so I feel like if there are other people out there that I can affect in that same way, I feel happy about that. But also I'm very public about it because I want to give myself some motivation to actually walk what I'm saying, and I suspect that there's an element of that for you as well, because it's people are, I don't want to be like, oh, people are counting on me, but gosh, it would really not look good. It's not good for me at all to have alcohol, but it would also it's a safety measure. That's another reason to stay sober today, because people know that that's a part of me that's important. So yeah.
Kathryn, thank you so much. This was awesome.
A delight. Yes, absolutely.
It was nice to meet you. And I will, I'll look for you again. You said on Instagram. Tell me again one more time.
Yep. It's at KB Lifts. So KAYBEE lifts, like lifting weight lifts. So if anybody wants to get a hold of me, you don't even have to follow me, but if you need a hand with sobriety, if you have any questions about getting sober or just want to chat about it, I'm here for that as well. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks again for listening. Our music, as always, is by Neglect. You can find more of his stuff at neglect.bandcamp.com.
And you can find us on all social media platforms that matter: Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And you can reach us at aisforalcoholic@gmail.com.
Talk to you later.
Yeah.